Stakeholders. Remember the Boeing 777 case? It was successful, in part because the engineering was good, but primarily because the stakeholder engagement was fantastic. Airlines were their principal stakeholders, and the Boeing co-created the 777 with 9 major airlines, and Boeing worked with stakeholders early and often even before the design phase started. Boeing didn't just engage airline stakeholders, they also engaged a variety of their own internal teams, suppliers and subcontractors, government and regulatory bodies, airports and ground service, and unions and worker groups. But as the project manager, do you need to pay equal attention to all of these stakeholders all the time? Let's take a look at this stakeholder influence grid. This is a 2x2 matrix, 4 quadrants. It's a tool to help project managers know how to best engage stakeholders. It goes from low to high power on one axis, which tells you how much authority, control, or influence a stakeholder has, and it goes from low to high interest on the other axis, which tells you how much a stakeholder cares about the project's success. This is a starting place for tailoring stakeholder communication. Starting with high power and high interest, these stakeholders are called key players. They are the most important stakeholders to keep happy. You want to update them frequently, and you want to know what their interest in the project is so that you can personalize your communication with them. These stakeholders are decision makers, so you have to plan and schedule decision-making moments with them, not just updating them. And escalation pathways. Escalation means to formally raise a problem or risk by appealing to someone with more authority or resources, because otherwise the problem won't be resolved. These are the people that you escalate to. Now, to be clear, you do have to follow a chain of command. These people might be higher up on the chain of command, so you might have to start a little bit lower down, potentially. The gatekeepers are also high power but are low interest. They don't need to be too involved, but they should be given periodic updates. The observers are both low power and low interest, so they're essentially low priority, but stakeholders can switch quadrants over the course of a project. So monitor observers, they may move to another quadrant where their influence changes. Operational support is low power but high interest. This is an important group. They need regular updates, but importantly, they need to be offered ways to provide their feedback for what they envision as a successful project and how their experience can contribute to the project's success. This stakeholder group can become champions of the project, or they can create problems for the project. So let's look at Boeing. Where would you place the airlines? They automatically have power because they are the buyers. If Boeing makes something that no one wants to buy, that's disastrous. And they have interest. Airlines had a direct financial and operational stake in the project's success. They wanted a plane that could fulfill a very particular role, and that plane did not already exist at the time. So airlines were key players. Airports and ground service. Airports are high power. They control runway lengths, gate configurations, taxiway widths, terminal compatibility, etc. Boeing has to conform to all major airports, not the other way around. But they are low interest. They don't care what planes Boeing is making. So they're gatekeepers. Ground service is the opposite, low power and high interest. They have no control over anything on the Boeing 777, but the safety of the ground crew and the efficiency of their workflow depends on how the airplane is designed. So they're operational support. And where would you place the internal teams, and should they all go in the same quadrant? Engineering. Engineers were critical to pulling off the design. They influenced every technical decision, and they were deeply involved from start to finish. So they had lots of power and lots of interest. The engineering department was a key player. Design depended on what engineering and marketing said. So they didn't have much power, but they were deeply interested in the outcomes, and they were engaged early on in the design, so they were operational support. Manufacturing has a lot of power. They control production and design. They have a lot of interest, especially in the manufacturing process, so manufacturing is a key player. Marketing and sales, at first, they have low power and low interest, but as the aircraft approaches going to market and client engagement intensifies, their power rises significantly, as does their interest. So marketing and sales start off as observers and move on to becoming key players. So again, stakeholders can bounce around quadrants over time. Financial planning. They control budgets, so they have very high level of influence throughout the life cycle of the project, and they're pretty interested, so they're key players. So sometimes there is tension between stakeholders. For example, the engineers may say that they need some new composite material for better performance. Then the financial people come in and say, yeah, but how are you going to pay for that? And the engineers say they want redundancy. So that's like backup systems or backup components that take over if the primary system or primary component fails. All right, but the curmudgeonly financial folks, they only say, it costs too much. By the way, they would never say that. Airplanes have to have redundancy. So do you just get some popcorn, sit down and watch them fight it out and see who's left standing? That could be fun. Or you could ask some questions. Here are some considerations for how to resolve conflict. You can ask, what's most critical to the project's success? Is it innovation? Is it speed, cost savings, consumer satisfaction? How does your decision impact project risk? If it saves money but increases all kinds of risk, is it really worth the savings? You could do a risk-adjusted cost-benefit analysis. Explore alternatives and trade-offs. Is there a compromise that both parties can agree with? Can engineering find something less costly but still innovative? Can finance pull money from other parts of the budget? And finally, appeal to authority. This is escalation, and it needs to follow a chain of command. You can see if senior executives or the steering committee have a strong opinion on the matter that could help you resolve the conflict. Where would you place the unions and workers? Typically, these are low power but high interest stakeholders, and they should be interested. Their jobs, their schedules, their working conditions are going to be affected by the project, and they themselves can be the source of a wealth of information. They often surface practical problems like this component doesn't fit well. And those insights that only frontline workers have the day in and day out experience with can affect a great deal of time, cost, and quality. The assembly line workers alone provided Boeing with a wealth of information on how to lay out the factory floor, arrange assembly line flow, design the tools for use in building the 777. They told Boeing which were the best fasteners and where on the factory floor fasteners should be located. Remember, the door that flew off a Boeing recently? Airplanes have millions of fasteners, bolts and nuts, screws and rivets, pins and clamps. So never forget the operational support stakeholder. They are very important. And their unions might also be interested. Changes brought about by the project must be negotiated with the unions. Project managers must be aware of collective bargaining agreements. And the power dynamic can shift when a union goes into action, whether it's just a regular contract negotiation or if they decide they're going to go on strike. So this seemingly low power group can suddenly have a great deal of influence on the project. Now that you know who they are and what they want, how do you manage them so the project succeeds? A large part of project management is just being a cheerleader for the project and for the team. And a large part of that is communicating with stakeholders the way they want to be communicated with. Create a deliberate plan for engaging stakeholders. how often you communicate with them, what kind of messaging they receive, what role they play in decisions, and what strategy is needed to increase their support and decrease their resistance. Stakeholder strategy is ongoing, so you should have a pulse on your stakeholders throughout the project, and communication with stakeholders is a primary deterrent from sabotage or someone creating problems for you and the project. So yes, stakeholders can become difficult, and it's worth mentioning that difficult stakeholders are not difficult because of animosity. It's just that we are all going to act on the incentive structure before us, or whatever biases or heuristics are influencing us at the moment, or preconceived ideas about what the project will do to us. So it's fine. Difficult stakeholders are not bad people. So you have to figure out ways to get them supportive. And the best ways are usually ways that show that you are supportive of them. Have conversations. But if you need to, then you might need to escalate, take concerns to higher ups, making sure to follow the proper channels and go through all the documentation and document your contentious conversations. And have stakeholders sign off on decisions that make changes to the project. The RACI matrix. This is a responsibility assignment matrix. It should reduce confusion by documenting who is doing what and how everyone is involved. It stands for responsible, accountable, support, consulted, and informed. So responsible is the individual or department who will complete the task or the deliverable. It's best to keep this to one person. So break down your tasks until they are at a unit size that requires just one resource, if possible. Accountable is the person who is answerable. They have to make sure that the responsible party completes the task, and there really only should be one accountable person per task. Support. The input of the support people is not required, but they are enablers. So if you need something from them, some expertise or some tool, you could go to them and they're there to support you. Consulted. Now, these people you are required to actively seek input from. They are subject matter. They have subject matter expertise, and at certain decision points or before certain work begins, you're required to consult them. Informed. These are people who just need to be updated. And you can use one-way communication, so you can send out an email or a newsletter, any sort of one-way blast, and that's all that's required. This is the traditional format for a RACI. The column headers have people's names or roles, and then the cells across from each task, you put in the letter for RASCI, and it shows who does what. Now, with this format, it's easy to see how each person or each role contributes to the project across multiple tasks. But you can also flip it. This format is good if you want to see all the people that are involved in a certain capacity for a certain task. So everyone who should be consulted on task A would be in one cell. So you see everybody in that role all at once. So go forth and identify your stakeholders, who cares about this project, who is critical to the project's successful execution, who can cause delays or setbacks, and who can influence the opinions of others. So that concludes the stakeholder video. Thank you very, very much.